it's already plugged in. So you can hear this is the Soho runs on EL84s. Now the American version of this amp is the Monterey, which runs on 6B6s. So this is a British amp that can do a pretty good imitation of an American amp, and this is an American amp that can do a pretty good imitation of a British amp. So if your ears are more tuned toward American kinds of sounds, can't say names. The camera's on me, Fender. Then you're going to like the 6V6 more. And if you're tuned to more British sounds, then you're going to really enjoy the EL84. You hear it sound a little more like a deluxe. Got that more American sound. Less mid-range. So what the bump is going to do is just flood mid-range in. So when you kick that mid-range on, you're allowing more mid-range. Because what a tone stack does is limit your mid-range. Like a treble control doesn't add treble to the signal. It allows treble. So what they're doing is blocking signal. And so when you kick the bump on, what we're doing is not regulating the mid-range to a greater degree. So you can set from 1 to 6 how much bump you want to have in on it. Like right now I have the bump set at 4 out of 6. So when I kick it in, I'm going to be roughly letting in 80% of the mid-range. Unregulated. So it's not going through a solder joint, it's not going through a pot, it's not going through a capacitor. So it's a lot purer, cleaner sound. American amp and hot rodded it. I mean, that's what they sound like. That's where this came from. Peter and I used to work on deluxes and Vibroluxes and all these little amps, and we'd like to just flood them with mid-range, and they sound like little rock and roll amps, more so than little country amps. Vocabulary at the touch of a switch. So as a gigging musician, you can preset where you want that bump. If I do just a little bit of bump, it's going to allow more mid-range through. This is the bump on 1. But here's the bump on 6, right, all the way up. So you can, if you've ever played a gig where you have to hit pedals and try to do everything, it's nice to be able just to preset that contrast. Just have it on a switch. And say you're over 30 like I am and you can't always see the damn pedal. And he's like, okay. That's over 40. A little bit over 40, yeah. I just had my 15th annual 29th birthday. So. But it's the same way. When there's spotlights going on and loud noise, maybe I've had a drink. I don't know. And I'm trying to reach out and hit a pedal. I don't like to worry about it. I tend to enjoy what I'm doing too much. And I got to hit a pedal. Okay, here we go. So it's nice just to have one button that takes care of all my sounds. And I'm fine. You hear how high-fi it gets? It gets where it almost starts sounding like an acoustic guitar. I'm playing a Les Paul. Les Pauls usually don't sound like that. Amps can't reveal all that stuff.
Sounds like a telly.
Yeah, it's getting very Telecaster. But all those sorts of vintage sounds, you can pull it off without having to change. And then let's see. Last but not least is the Royal Albert, which is really loud. So now is your chance to move back. This amp runs on a pair of KT77s, which is, in my mind, what an EL34 wants to be when it grows up. It's a little more robust version of an EL34 and has better highs, better lows, much better clean sound. But when it rolls over into distortion, it sounds like an old EL34. Which to me, modern EL34s don't sound anything like old EL34s. How many of you guys have ever played an old amp with old EL34s in it? The distortion's just unbelievably good. And the new tubes don't do that, really. a little fatter sound. Same thing though if you want to roll it into distortion. This is going to wake the neighbors. Sorry, I'm neurotic. So this is the amp that, like if you're out on the road, if you've seen the Black Crowes in the past 3 or 4 years, this is what Rich Robinson's using. If you're a fan of country music, Vince Gill, Keith Urban, a lot of big country players like this for that sort of nice mid-range. And the joinery, there's no nails in this. You know, it's actual true joints.
It's like...
Yeah. It's 10 times stronger than a nail.
Yeah.
And
is it really sounding better if you do it like this?
Yes, it resonates more in sympathy with the speaker instead of just going. It goes. You know, like you can really hear the difference. Oops, I'm trying to get this out without. There we go. All right,
put it away.
So, Little Elvis is actually done. We use a little circuit board for it, but on most of our amps they're actually just point-to-point wiring. We do a little circuit board on this one because the circuit's so small. We would have to, you know, it'd be this small. But if you look through here, we do a lot of crazy things that just to make it more reliable. And there's a lot of choices that I've made in here, and they're for very good reasons, not just for posterity. Things like these are 1,000-volt military switches. You know, anything that a human touches is going to break. So really all I need in here is a 300 or 400 volt switch, but these are 1,000-volt switches that are sealed and tough. And in the power section, you'll notice, you see these black resistors right here? Those are silicone-coated, wire-wound, flame-proof resistors. They're not going to drift. They're not going to catch on fire. And one of the biggest causes of failures in amps is in the power section. If you look in most amps, you're going to see these big white concrete resistors that are 10% tolerance. So that means if it's supposed to be a 100K resistor, it could be 90K, it could be 110. You don't know. So it's very hard to make amps consistently there at all. And if you notice on my coupling capacitors, you'll see a black line that's marked on these. I don't know if you've ever played with a capacitor on your guitar. You know, you can turn it one way, it sounds, if you go in there and solder it backwards, it sounds different. Well, these capacitors aren't supposed to have polarity, but they sort of do. You can measure, they measure differently. So I had the guy mark them on the low side of all the capacitors. So wherever you see the black stripe, that's where signal's coming in. That's the negative side of the capacitor. Electricity always travels from negative to positive. So I want this to move through here with the greatest of ease. You know, I don't want anything else to happen. Notice here on the tubes, on our ECC 83s, in the preamp section, they're all shock mounted. You can see the rubber underneath them, so that they're flexible. They're shock mounted. That really keeps them quiet, makes them less microphonic. We use the long plate 12AX7s. So it's just more information. This is how one part of your amp communicates with the next part. So when you see ECC 83s with a plate that big on it, you know, there's not much information coming through there. So we use all the long plate ECC 83s, which tend to drive a lot of amp manufacturers crazy because the longer the plate is, the more microphonic it can be. But we throw away a lot of tubes to find out. But anyway, that's our thing. That's what's inside.
It looks magnificent. Yeah.
Thank you.